There are a lot of printed resources that can be utilized for either developing greater command of the scriptures or for edifying you in certain doctrinal areas.
Mm-hmm. Even over the last year, I have tried to do a deeper dive into the doctrine of union with Christ, into thinking about the Lord's Supper, and the doctrine of the Trinity, just making sure that I have my head around how Christians have thought about these things for 2,000 years.
So good.
And am not inadvertently either misleading my people in some of my language or robbing them of some of the wonder and the joy that could be theirs if they have a better grasp on how doctrines are not so much a list as they are a web. And they are interconnected in this beautiful way, such that if you poke one, there are going to be ripple effects elsewhere. And we want our people to view it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we want all pastors, we would encourage all pastors to be seeking to carve out this time to grow, to feed their minds, to stay sharp. But also for some pastors, it might be a wise thing to see if they can pursue another degree.
Right.
So as the chancellor of a seminary, talk about the benefit for a pastor in the trenches of ministry considering some kind of further education.
Well, I actually encourage elders at local churches to give their pastors study leave, kind of like you did with Kyle, okay? If we get vacation, you want to spend that vacation on your wife and your family. You are loath to carve out any of that vacation time and use it on study. If you give study leave and say, we want you actually to go study in addition to your vacation, that provides tremendous opportunity and impetus for edifying, self-edification. So I encourage elders to give that time to your pastors just like you would weekly want your pastor to be.
It'll come back to benefit you.
It will benefit you. You will never regret your pastor having done that extra study. And so it can be a pastor could go do a THM, or a pastor could go take courses without ever intending to graduate with anything, but have concentrated, blocks of time, maybe a week intensive course where they went and studied something that was edifying. And again, it allowed them to decompress from the pressures of the work in the local church, pull away from the demand, you can be in the middle of preparing, the phone call comes, you got to drop everything and you've got to go to the hospital, or you've got to go to the house, or you've got to go to where the car wreck was. Put them in some place where they can just concentrate on God, on the Bible, on studying. That's a very refreshing thing to do. But there's something about having to engage your intellectual faculties in a project that you're just going to get it in ways that you wouldn't sitting at a conference. And I think some pastors need to do that. And but let me say, I think we not only need to do that for our own edification, but the fact of the matter is theological education has already changed in our time, and it's not going back. And the old system where a significant majority of the ministry going into, say, the Southern Baptist Convention and the Presbyterian Church in America went through a certain number of seminaries, it's going to be more and more diffused. There are going to be different pathways of education going into ministry, which is going to mean we're going to need more pastors who are involved in theologically educating the next generation of ministers, because it's the few seminaries that used to have a monopoly on that don't have the monopoly that they used to have. And it means I'm always looking for pastors who have academic credentials who are willing to teach. There are electives that they're able to teach. Sometimes they come in and sub for professors that are on sabbatical. That ends up being, by the way, a real refreshing thing for them. For a pastor to be able to come teach doctrine of God for a week and get away from the grind of ministry and think about God and help young people that are preparing for gospel work to think about God well. It's just a wonderful thing. I had that experience as a pastor when I was a pastor at First Pres in Jackson for 17 years. I was part-time at the seminary. I was adjunct, and I would teach about a course a semester. And it was just wonderful to be able to leave the church and the pressures of ministry and go teach about God, teach about the Bible, interact with young people that were asking questions. What's it going to be like? Be able to tell them, well, let me tell you what it's going to be like. I'll tell you from this week what it's going to be like. That was just a wonderful thing for me. I would say that the church, by allowing me to do that, was actually letting me do continuing education because I had to prepare lectures.
Right.
I had to get things ready, and you learn a lot when you're teaching. And so we see we see pastors doing this in D-Min programs. We see pastors doing this.
Even the demons believe in shudder.
Even the demons believe. Sorry. That's right. Yeah. Thank you, David Wells, and the demonization of the ministry. Remember that old article that caused so much controversy? I do see pastors. I'm thinking right now, you may know the name Jonathan Landry Cruz. John is, he's an OPC minister. He's written several books. He's written beautiful hymns. And he was in my Doctor of Ministry course in Charlotte a year ago. And, number one, I thought, well, what a blessing it is for me to have a guy like this in class. I mean, he could be up here teaching this class himself, and there he was sitting in a covenant theology class for ministry, thinking through the implications of covenant theology for pastoral ministry. And he's a guy who's already edifying the church. He's writing books. He'll speak at conferences. He'll be a guy who's able to teach classes someday.
But the point you're making, argument from the greater to the lesser, even he hasn't arrived, but he still knows his need for continuing.
Absolutely.
So how should a pastor think through? I mean, of course, this is going to require case-by-case situational wisdom, because every situation will be different, and some pastors just won't have the ability to do it. But how should someone think through whether they should pursue an advanced degree? Because it's not right for everyone.
No, it isn't. And we were talking off camera, and I have one of my early students at the seminary was not the best academic. The academics were not his thing. He was really interested in the material. He was really godly, and so he wanted to take it in. He struggled with writing and with testing and things of that nature. Now, he has turned out to be a better pastor than I'll ever be. He doesn't need to go do a PhD to edify himself. There's going to be a different way for that guy to edify himself. But there are going to be some guys that have some chops to do some further study who ought to. And it's going to be edifying to them. It's going to be good for the church. And then they're probably going to be able to have a wider application of that somewhere. I tell most of us can have some area that we have focused on that ends up being a blessing to the circle of ministers that we're in. All of us usually have a little bit larger of circle of ministers that we associate with. And I love to hear from guys that are experts in certain areas that I'm not an expert in. They edify me. So you were talking about the doctrine of God and wanting to go back and learn the doctrine of the Trinity. Well, reading Scott, for me, my president in Orlando, my junior colleague in the seminary, a man, more than a decade younger than me, good bit more than a decade younger than me, has written on doctrine of God and the doctrine of Trinity in ways where Scott Swain, yeah.
Who, remember, was I had him in seminary.
Did you?
Because I started out at RTS.
Oh, wow.
Way back in the day.
Wow.
And I took Doctrine of God 1 from him, and it was remarkable.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that experience in seminary. I was still working in the day where theistic mutualism was the thing.
Okay, help me stay sharp. What is that? I don't know what that is.
That's a term that was invented just a few years ago to describe a tendency to change the classical doctrine of God in an anthropomorphic direction and to deny things like the impassibility of God or the immutability of God or the timelessness of God, the eternality of God, and to define them in more creaturely categories, more relational categories. That was still going on when I was in seminary in the 1980s, even in Orthodox circles. And what's happened in your generation, Matt, is there's a whole group of young scholars, Baptists, Presbyterians, Anglicans, that they are on fire for robust classical Christian doctrine of God. And so much so when I read Scott and heard Scott teach and read him write, read his writings on doctrine of God and doctrine of the Trinity, I realized I need to change the way I say some of these things. I need to talk about this different. My confessional instincts had kept me out of trouble, but I realized that I had not gotten the fullness of my own tradition. And when I encountered Scott's writings, I just thought, man, I need to get better in that area. So it doesn't matter your age, Matt. You can be an old guy like me, and there are young guys that are out there doing really good work that is it's gonna edify you. If you're a pastor, you've been a pastor for 40 years, doesn't matter. It's still gonna edify you. You're gonna be excited about God in new ways again. You're going to talk about God with a new excitement and a new knowledge. You're going to be able to apply certain things to your people that they would have missed if you didn't know those things. It's all of us ought to be trying to get better.
Yeah.
And all of us need to figure out how to learn somehow. Doctors are expected to do it. Accountants are expected to do it. Counselors are expected to do it. Attorneys are expected to do it. Teachers are expected to do it. Pastors ought to do it.